But let me bring on board Abhijat Diwanji, founder, Neostrat Advisors, and he's a great voice to have on a day like this to zoom out, give us some perspective on all that's playing out. Abhijat, fabulous having you here. Give us a sense, first off, how are you reading into the language of what has been put out in that resignation letter? Adverse, good, how are you reading into it if you were to give us a perspective?
Really adverse the way it's been written. But whether it is as adverse a situation is a different issue altogether.
Right.
So yes, it harms the market. You've seen what's happened on the stock price, on perception, on everybody going on guard, everybody trying to resolve the situation, speaking to the regulator, etc., etc. So clearly, it did create ripples, which from the face of it don't seem to be required, because even the regulator, as you just said right now, has indicated that there is no issue with the bank. And the regulator saying that no issue with the bank from an RBI perspective actually means that the bank is systemically sound and the decisions of the board are mature. Because RBI doesn't just stick to regulation, it also is very qualitative in its assessment. There have been situations where RBI has stepped in and said, qualitatively, we are not happy, though the letter of the law has been followed. But in this particular case, I'm sure, and of course, even the past of HDFC's performance has said so, that ethically the bank is sound. There may have been some procedural issues in the past, those have been corrected. The bank has been always and will, and as proven even today, has been very forthcoming on its issues. And when somebody is very forthcoming on its issues and completely transparent, it shows that there is no issue at its end. So ideally, what it seems is that there could have been a personality-related issue, which also Keki mentioned, and that is quite likely, because often the dividing line between what a board needs to do and what a management needs to do is often a cause of dispute. So the good part is that yes, there is healthy debate on that board. The bad part is one doesn't know when to stop.
And if I quote Reserve Bank of India, particularly on governance and material concerns, it is maintaining that there are no concerns on the bank. But having said that, if you recall the answers which has been given by the management, and I also asked that question in the call, on one hand, management is saying that they don't know the exact reasons why the letter was written like that. In fact, communication is important. He has clearly mentioned issues of ethics there, while we don't know the exact issue. Could it have been handled differently, you think, or the wording of the wording of the letter was a problem?
So I think the wording of the letter is left open. It says it doesn't comply with my values and ethics. It doesn't say that the organization is unethical. There's a difference. So he may have a certain set of ethics or values, and he may have thought that maybe those have the management is not in sync with them. Because, I also see this very conscious part in that letter, which says it doesn't refer to senior management, it only refers to middle and lower management being excellent. I mean, that also shows that there seems to be some level of friction which has resulted in these so-called inconsistent values. So this is where we are there. I don't think he has ever pointed out, even Mr. Chakrabarti has not pointed out to the fact that there could be potential unethical practices within the bank. He just says it doesn't appeal to his values and things. That's the difference.
You've culled it out beautifully, and you've kind of broken that letter down to the T, as an accountant should. But give us a sense. Management has come out and clarified there's been no friction. All the board minutes seem to, at least they indicate that there is no conflict. This has come as a complete surprise to them. What do you make of the commentary that's come out this morning, if you've had a chance to kind of go through that?
So I've not been through the commentary, but
right.
I've just heard various conversations happen around it. So I do think, first of all, I think that it's very healthy of a board to debate things on the face of it. And that you've got to give credit to the HDFC board and the HDFC organization, that there is adequate debate, adequate differences of opinion being tabled and discussed. What is wrong sometimes is, one, letting those issues out in the public. Because if the ramifications are my point of view versus management's point of view, that is not an allegation on the organization. And hence, ideally should have come out slightly more in a better fashion than it did. The other issue is that often this happens, that between management and board, there's always a confusion as to where does the board's responsibility end and where does the management's responsibility begin. So management very clearly is responsible for execution of the strategy in a way, decision on the strategy in a particular way. The board's job is to oversight to make sure that the governance is in place, the minority shareholders are protected at every point in time, and what the bank is doing is ethical business on a consistent basis. Now, in banks particularly, there is also the central bank, which is the RBI, which has a similar oversight on the board as well as on the management. And it places a lot of emphasis on the board in terms of every kind of decision making, be it technology related, be it business controls related, be it accounting related. Now, because there is an onus kept and the regulator is so strict about it, boards tend to be much more diligent. But boards have to know that they need to stop at oversight and not get into implementation. And that is where I think sometimes the basic values and frictions take place between management and the board.
While the answers have been given by the management, but one cannot deny that there are many questions which are still unanswered. And therefore, I want to ask you, what are the options for board now? Having said that, they do not know why the resignation happened. Of course, the NRC will decide upon the next chairman. But is there any options left for the board to undertake with the past chairman?
So no, normally what boards would do in similar situations, and a lot of times these happen, we get anonymous mails from people citing issues. So there is a level of investigation that the board is expected to do. And that is to get into what have been the past issues being discussed at the board, what could have been the points where there have been differences of opinion which have been aired, and how those differences of opinion would impact the general governance risk as well as oversight of the board. That I think the board would do, and the board should do on its own. I don't think this will be regulatorily induced because the regulator has expressed comfort. What the board has done in the immediate is that spoken to the regulator. That's a big thing, actually going up to the regulator and saying, listen, we have this problem. And getting an approval, and the regulator actually giving an approval to somebody like Keki, who knows the bank inside out, to say, please come and head as a non-exec chairman for a short period of time. So that has happened. The board will surely now deliberate to say, is this an exaggeration of a resolution, of a resignation, or is it something that deserves a more systemic look in particular areas? Then the board will ultimately be able to decide whether it needs to do any more corrective action or not a corrective action. I think the onus of the board and the proactiveness of the board is something which will prove its maturity, which I think will happen.
Abhijat, very conscious that I need to let you go, but one last question. So the underlying, I think, from that, or the takeaway of your opinion seems to be that there is absolutely no concern where HDFC Bank is concerned. This is a very, very healthy debate, and this is an unfortunate incident which was an outcome of that debate. Is that the best way to kind of read through this situation?
Seems to be. We are not in the boardroom, so we don't know.
Absolutely.
It seems to be because if you look at the past performance, the past conduct, and the RBI's reactions to whatever has happened, that seems to be the case, that there is nothing systemic or nothing from an ethical point of view which would cause a concern for the organization from its governance point of view. So I guess one will have to address what would happen, and frankly, depending on, as I said earlier, the board will deliberate what have been the past issues and whether those past issues merit a relook. If they merit, they will happen. Otherwise, there may just be a new chairman coming in.
Abhijat, thank you so much. You've been generous with your time as well as your views. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very, very clear with regard to how he's viewing this entire saga which is playing out today. India's second largest bank, largest in terms of market cap.
Systematically important bank.
Very, very important. I wouldn't be surprised if the RBI wants to quell any concerns. But Abhijat coming out and calling that out as well, that there is very little concern according to him as well. We'll still in a very short break. We'll continue conversation on the other side. Keep getting you perspective with regard to this HDFC Bank piece which is playing.